Hey everyone, thank you for listening to Coffee Smarter Pro. If you're enjoying this show or any of the Roast West Coast coffee podcasts, please help us grow by buying us a cup of coffee and signing up for our newsletters. Links in the show notes. Thank you. Before we get started on the show today, I want to shout out the presenting sponsor, Roastar Coffee Packaging. We couldn't do this without them. You can find Roastar online at roastar.com. Now, on to the show. Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee Smarter Pro, the coffee education corner of the podcasting world, focused at education for coffee professionals, aspiring coffee professionals, and those of you who are passionate about brewing a good cup of coffee. I'm your host, Ryan Woldt of Roast West Coast. Today we're joined by Djerai. She is the CEO of Metropolis Coffee Company based in the Chicago, Illinois region, and is a new Coffee Smarter expert to the podcast. Today, we're going to learn a bit about Anne's coffee journey. She's going to share some of her expertise on how to develop a private label, which is something Metropolis is known for and have been doing in coffee for some time. You can go to metropoliscoffee.com for context while you're listening today. That's metropoliscoffee.com. Anne, a real pleasure. Thank you for coming on the podcast to chat.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. I'm very excited. This is my first podcast.
Oh, really? That makes me happy. I'm glad you agreed.
But I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Well, then you're an expert. That's perfect. That's how I started. Well, we should break you into the show then and into this whole back and forth concept. So I have to ask you the most important question I'll ask you all day, which is your favorite Keanu Reeves movie is what?
I actually thought about this because I'm a single mom here in Chicago and I don't get to watch a lot of movies, and pretty much everything comes in one ear and goes out the other. So I went back and I think I'm going to have to say Devil's Advocate.
Oh,
what
wow.
a great
That's
movie.
A real throwback.
1997.
Yeah, I remember seeing that movie and being a little frightened.
It's terrifying, right?
About my future. If you're listening, I'm going to link to the trailer in the newsletter. You can find that on our newsletter. Okay. I don't know you, Anne, and I would like to know you. So I'm wondering, who are you, and how did you get interested, or do you have a memory of coffee that kind of got you started down this path?
It's funny. So I actually, when I was in first grade, I got terribly burned by coffee out of a percolator. The only scars I have on my body are actually on my right arm, and it's from that burn. So I like to kind of think maybe there was a Spider-Man type situation with getting into coffee. But no, I never expected to get into coffee. I moved from a small town in southwestern Indiana in 2009, thinking that I would, get my PhD in international relations and politics. I had spent 10 years before that running Italian and Palestinian kitchens in Evansville, Indiana. So I had a lot of culinary experience and management experience, but definitely didn't think it was going to be, food or beverage was going to be in my lifelong career path.
No one ever
does, right? Has anybody ever said I wanted to start with coffee and that's where I ended up? But when I moved here, I did a lot with restaurants and honestly worked on my master's degree in politics, thinking that the next level would be that dissertation. Life got in the way. I ended up getting married, having a baby, and then getting divorced when the baby was just one. So I was kind of forced back into the workplace thinking, like, what the hell am I going to do? And I ended up getting a job at Renoco Coffee out of St. Louis, Missouri. They were looking for really a former chef to sell coffee into some of the higher end restaurants in Chicago. So I got that job and I immediately fell in love with it. But, the interesting part of that is I really ended up doing more vending and OCS and gas station coffee, believe it or not, because there was just more money in it. And it's really hard to sell a St. Louis roaster in Chicago. Chicago is like, can you imagine?
I'm from Wisconsin, and I'm familiar with the rivalry between Chicago, St. Louis, Milwaukee. There's a definite challenge there.
Oh, You've got it. So here I am with my little, I actually, in order to bring brewed coffee out to sample, I had a little pop-up Red Ryder wagon that I would pull my son around in the weekends in. And during the work week, it was my coffee wagon. So
Wow, that's
yeah.
that's
And
very
and
fun.
so yeah, it was great. I just any type of solution. But it was a great company to work for. And then I moved on to a company called Tradecraft Coffee and Tea Outfitters, which was then bought by Canteen when I was there. But at Tradecraft, under the tutelage of Michael Klong and Jim Carbone and the training of the famous Lindsay Letter, I learned specialty coffee, which is an entirely different world from commercial or commodity coffee. Lots of nerds, got my stripes there, and ended up staying with Canteen for several years thereafter and moving to a large roaster in Kentucky, because I had to move, called John Conti Coffee, which was also owned by a franchise partner of Canteen. I developed my own little trade craft at their headquarters there because I thought, I don't like working in commercial coffee. John Conti was definitely a commercial coffee roaster. They really needed some more roasters on their team. They needed to propel, or on their offerings list, I should say, and they needed to propel specialty coffee in that market. So I developed a program there, and tried really hard to sell and spread the good news on specialty coffee in the South,
Hmm.
which I'm from a small town, and it's always about 10 years behind on food and beverage.
I'm
Uh,
actually from a small town in Wisconsin,
oh,
in
so
the
you get
Midwest,
it.
so I'm very familiar. Yes, I knew that if it showed up at our local clothing store, it had already hit the coast years ago. That was my fashion concept. If it was on the mannequin at American Eagle, I knew it was already out in the world and I was safe.
Yeah, you're so right. And I remember, like, nobody had kegs of cold brew, or nobody had fresh ground. They didn't have really options. It was more frac packs and, just kind of really subpar options that would come from food service distributors. And I tried really hard. I doing anything from setting up a picnic tap on a keg to trying to infuse it with nitrogen and rolling it around on the showroom floor, just trying to get some momentum going, as I think we all of us coffee people have did back in the day, but this was pretty late. So that's how I really got started. And then I had friends at Metropolis because I distributed for them when I lived in Chicago and worked for Tradecraft. And so I kept that friendship, which I tend to do. I have, I keep friends from every part of this journey. Ended up coming up and getting hired to do strategic partnerships for Metropolis, which is just a fancy word of saying high level sales for people that talk too much. Um,
Thank you for being upfront about that. I
yeah,
appreciate
no, I know it's such a bullshit title, but I absolutely loved it at the time. And that was in 2018, or I'm sorry, 2019.
And Metropolis, your title now, I believe, is CEO. Correct me if
That's
I'm
correct.
wrong. But Metropolis is a longtime family owned business. How do you rise up through the ranks there without hitting kind of a family ceiling? And I don't know
Right.
anything about the family or the ownership. I'm just curious, how you worked that out.
Oh, it's such a good question. And I feel, people say they feel blessed. I mean, maybe it's that, but I really feel lucky. Our company is 20 years old as of this last January. It is owned by Tony and Jeff Dreyfus, father and son. They're both still active in the company. And when I got on board at Metropolis, we did have a C suite already. Tony and Jeff were not part of that C suite, but they, obviously very active in the company, showing up every day. And what I noticed was that the C suite we had at the time was not really utilizing them in their full capacity, specifically Tony, because Tony has this really innate ability to understand what needs to come next for Metropolis and when it needs a refresh. So the plan was never really to become CEO, but I slowly started taking over roles in the company as our profits dropped during COVID, and they needed me, and we started honestly, you know no bones about it, we started firing people that really weren't committed to the growth of the brand or a new trajectory. And Tony and I and Jeff, we joined forces in doing that. First being, made vice president of sales and operations, and then executive vice president. Tony gifted me, anointed me, if you will, and I was so honored by it with the role of CEO, which I take, I'm very proud of it. The biggest thing about working for Tony and Jeff is that, I spent the years before this with companies that I got a lot of red lights. Anything I'd suggest, it was kind of like, no, it's not possible. It's not smart, kind of seeing the trends and things beyond the horizon. And Tony and Jeff are not like that. We get green lights for good ideas, and we get their buy-in. And so when I say I'm lucky, I really feel like I am. They support us and they love a good idea. And I think that's why this brand is fire now.
I think the skill of an owner or an ownership group to recognize talent and where it's best utilized is underappreciated, and being willing to step back from, I mean, realistically, what is a nice title, a great title, but also, like, if you're an owner, you can kind of give that to yourself and be the face of something, and to say, no, this is the person that we want in that role is a skill. I mean, it's a talent to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And they're great at stepping back and letting good work show and
Yeah.
supporting it just however they can. And if that's nothing, it's nothing. If it's something, it's something.
I have worked for owners like that, and also owners who are the opposite of that, and I definitely prefer that.
Yeah.
I stopped by the Metropolis booth at SEA, which was in your home turf of Chicago. I just stopped by briefly, but one of the big things I walked away thinking about was private labeling. I actually think I had a can of cold brew that had kind of a general label on it.
Hmm.
I'm wondering, and the reason I asked you to come on the show was to teach me a little bit about that. What is private labeling?
Yeah. And this is a good opportunity to discuss really what's private labeling and what it's not, right?
Hmm.
Because white labeling and private labeling are terms that are used pretty interchangeably, but there is a market difference. So yeah, we had a booth with actually our co-packer for our cold brew at SCA, which you saw, kind of offering what we considered a mecca of private label services to small specialty roasters at the SCA Expo this year. We looked for private label options as a roaster. We looked for a co-packer during COVID for certain projects that we wanted to take on, and we couldn't find one. So we became what we needed. And so now we're offering those services to other roasters. And essentially, what it is, coffee is, especially specialty coffee, is a notoriously cash poor business. And in order to pack different utilities, which is what I call them, which tends to be a lot of single serve or convenience products, right? You need a lot of money and you need a certain type of infrastructure. And specialty coffee roasters tend to be, as one of the pillars, they tend to be made to order.
Hmm.
And because of that, it doesn't really lend itself to more of kind of an inventoried or convenience led product offering. So we can pack anything from just a regular whole bean coffee with a specified label, which is kind of more of a white label situation where the customer can decide just kind of how they want it to look, but Metropolis takes it from there. But really, for private label, we can do anything from, a fraction pack, which is like a little pillow pack, however you want to call it, portion pack,
Hmm.
to a whole bean coffee or a retail bag. And we can do everything from bag sourcing, bringing in coffee from the roaster. They can use ours. And, kind of our pièce de résistance that we developed during COVID is our Nespresso original compatible compostable filling line that we brought in from Italy. We invested over $500,000 to pack a compostable Nespresso original capsule, and we are the only ones doing it in North America right now. I should say, I'm sorry, strike that. We're the only ones doing it in the United States right now.
Is that, just to clarify, you're talking about a compostable, like, one-time single-use uh, product? Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a thimble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you have seen the commercials with George Clooney? And we all know kind of
Yes.
where we're
Yeah.
going with it, except for specialty
Yeah. We don't have George Clooney, but
yet. But just because I'm curious now that you brought it up, is that a compostable commercially, or compostable like I can throw it in my compost at home?
yeah, so we have, if it's touted as commercially compostable, it has to be BPI certified. Our products are BPI certified and also CMA certified, which is a very stringent level of certification for compostable products. But we also do a home compostable option, which
Hmm.
shelf life is a little bit less, and they don't tend to carry certifications other than
Sure.
the TUV. But we can do both.
Yeah, and I ask because so I live in a community where we have composting as part of our garbage pickup. Like we have a special
Oh,
garbage can
nice.
for it. But that's a relatively new thing and still relatively uh it's not everywhere in our county even. And so, just knowing where I am, when you see those, there's a lot of people that tout compostable, but it's like, well, how functional is that if your community isn't composting? So you always want to be aware of that.
And you're exactly right, Ryan, because we first rolled out, when we first looked at single serve, we rolled out a plastic K
Hmm.
cup. So not espresso, which is what we're doing now, but we rolled out a plastic K cup, and there's just no recycling. Chicago doesn't recycle, and I know in California, which is our client that really wanted this compostable capsule is out of California, and I know that you guys are always kind of on the forefront of what's most environmental projects and all infrastructure. But with we chose a compostable product that is non-PLA, because a big part of commercial composting is that a lot of the products can leave microplastics in the soil.
Hmm.
So even if they, are compostable and they go to the dump, at the landfill, they still will ebb into the groundwater, and they can leave microplastics. Our products don't. So while the community might not have an infrastructure of composting or compost pickup, most big cities do, by the way. But at least we know that it's a baby step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I'm here in California, and we do have definitely the reputation for being on the forefront, but we don't. Sometimes we go further than we actually can do, but we announce it really loudly. So
Right.
we have to work it out in reverse. If I'm a company that is like I roast coffee and I think I do a good job and I want to get these some more products out there in the world, but I don't have the bandwidth or I don't have the skill set or the knowledge or the money and equipment, I reach out to you. What do I need to come to the table prepared with?
Yeah, so you need an idea. It helps to have a brand or a lot of money to propel a brand, right? Because we can work with roasters or brands
Hmm.
that coffee brands that maybe they don't make their own product, but they need somebody to do it. So those are the two big things, right? You need to have an idea of where you want to sell the product. So, for example, if you're looking to sell into cafes and really want to do a private label, you need to make sure that you have some type of developed channel for that for wholesale business. If you're a CPG brand or CPG roaster and you sell into the Costco's of the world, or the Kroger's or wherever, you're going to want to have that channel developed. You never want to put the cart before the horse.
Hmm.
But with that too, you need to have an idea of what you're looking for. So, I always view coffee as a solutions game. So you need to make sure that, the blade fits the razor and vice versa. And so when we kind of vet these opportunities, we always look for kind of the longevity of the opportunity, the brand awareness, and the ability for the brand to sell. Ultimately, that's their business. But, the other big part of this too is being specialty coffee. They have to be willing to pay a premium for a really good product and understand what the utility of the product is.
If I'm not roasting my own coffee, but I'm coming to you to develop a private label and you're roasting the coffee,
Mhm.
assuming obviously that's what you do and you're good
Yeah.
at it, but is there a process that you go through to say this is the style of coffee, this is what I want for me, this is kind of what we want to represent?
For sure. We've, of course, want to first find out what the customer wants. Do they want a fair trade organic coffee? Do they want a single origin? What roast profile? So we go through a pretty arduous specking process. I mean, we do that anyway for whole bean coffee, but for the capsules themselves, we go through, again, a kind of an exhaustive process of making sure that what the client is looking for, they're able to get. And that will be everything from, TDS to grind analysis, making sure that the product isn't channeling, making sure that it's extracting properly. So we do go back and forth quite a bit in product development, and we have to do that. It's not you're not selling a finished product. Somebody's going to buy this and they're going to brew it, right? So it's not
Hmm.
just it's not a ready to drink. So that specking process becomes really important. And I think that's what sets us apart from a lot of the larger co-packers, is because we are coffee people. We have 20 years of roasting experience behind us and a great reputation. We're award winning. And I think, we have two Q graders on staff, and this process is not simple, but we wanted, again, to be the brand that other specialty coffee companies could look to and say, Metropolis is doing it. I know they've got it.
I just want to kind of list real quick some of the products that can be produced through this process would be like
Hmm.
just and tell me, shout me out if I'm wrong here, but it's whole bean coffee, the single serve coffees that we just discussed, the espressos,
Hmm.
cold
Capsules.
brew. What else? Is there anything else besides that as far as the product lines go?
So we don't make cold brew here. We have a great partner in Chicago that does. Nothing wet in our facility. It's too
Okay,
complicated.
yeah, got it.
But we also do portion packs. So we do, frac packs is what we usually call them in the industry, which are really great for hotels, office coffee, food
Hmm.
service, where they maybe don't have the dexterity to have a grinder, something like that. So we do those, and we have a high speed frac pack line here at Metropolis.
Got it. What would you say are the limitations or the advantages of this process for someone else? I mean, obviously it's working for you and you're finding a way to disseminate it to others, but why should other companies consider doing this?
Developing their own co-packing brand.
Yeah. Yeah, not it doesn't necessarily. I mean, obviously, it would be great if it was with you, but what are the advantages of having someone else take on some of these responsibilities?
Oh, got it. Yeah. Honestly, it's know-how. I mean, you have to have a fully certified process that is heavily managed with equipment that is very expensive, that is also managed with, a arduous preventative maintenance calendar. The hard part too is, when we first got into this a year and a half ago, it didn't occur to us that, we had been making everything to order for the most part, but this is really manufacturing coffee.
Hmm.
So, setting a schedule as opposed to just saying, oh, this order's coming in today. We're going to roast, 5,000 pounds today. No, this is like planned weeks and months in advance. And that learning curve was huge for Metropolis. We didn't really get it. That's like the first part of that. So I would say that that would be a deterrent for anybody looking to get into co-packing, but in and looking to do it themselves. But on the other hand, there's a lot to be said about having complete product control. So it's a fine line, right? So we tend to kind of like to do things ourselves, and I think a lot of specialty coffee companies do. So we try to make sure that they know that their hands are on the wheel the whole time. So if that means they want to roast their own coffee, that's what it means. They get full say over what the label looks like, and because we understand what the pros and cons are of working
Hmm.
with another company to make your products. The other big thing too is we are used to being manufacturers in that we are used to certain margins, right? Now specialty coffee is the margins are way worse than commercial coffee. Like you can't even imagine. We are spending a lot of money on coffee, specifically on green coffee. But you also have to consider you're not taking on the labor and all of those other things that I just mentioned. That can be a bit of a learning curve. People really want the margin that they need for their profit and loss statement. But that's it depends upon how you look at it. If you have a great infrastructure already, maybe it is smart for you to take on things yourself. If not, maybe you should look at a co-packer.
Maybe. I can't let you go today without asking about budgeting. You just brought up margins. I'm assuming there are minimums. Are there other pricing things, without getting too specific, because obviously every partnership will be a little bit different, that people should consider when considering a co-packer? Yeah, I think just to clarify, you mentioned like margins might be different than if you're doing it all yourself, but
Hmm.
obviously you're getting the advantage of not having the labor and the maintenance and all of that. But is
Hmm.
there anything else that people should consider on the pricing arena before we get too far away?
I think one thing that we're really bad at is standardizing margin. in the in the specialty coffee industry. And I think the hardest lesson that specialty coffee companies learn is when they go into the grocery arena. So retail, right? The margins are super skinny. It's so different than selling to a kind of bread and butter wholesale account where maybe you have to ROI a drip brewer. So I think when they're looking for a co-packer, you want to start small, and we have low minimums. So our minimum is a pallet and it can be split. We when we first looked for co-packers, the minimum was like a container and or a truckload, right? And it's just not sustainable. So starting small and accepting a little bit less so that you can make sure to make room for whether it's the distributor's margin, the store's margin, and then any promotions or buybacks or what have you. So I think if the co-packer, like Metropolis and the brand that we're working with are willing to accept a bit less to make room for the volume,
Hmm.
that might, that tends to facilitate a good deal, because it really is, it becomes a partnership then, right? And so when you work with us, we give the full kind of range. So you tell us you're working with KE, we're going to say, okay, this is where you need to be. You tell us what margin, we kind of meet in the middle and we go from there. And I just don't know how else you could do it. If we just, when we first started this, we thought of kind of, we learned this the hard way because when we first started pitching capsules and pitching private label, we looked to get our margin on everything because that's what we're used to. And we've learned a lot from that. It definitely is a partnership. And, you need to see the forest, not the trees, right? I don't know if that's too vague.
No, no,
Uh,
I think that that makes sense. I mean, one thing that I have always forgotten about, not completely, but it's something that I don't always put on the forefront, is you mentioned, is accounting for future buybacks or future sales or future discounted pricing and how that's going to impact my bottom line over the bigger picture, not just, week to week, month to month, day to day. And that I think is something that not even on private labeling, but just generally in business, people need to remember and pay attention to. I was going to ask you a question about starting a coffee brand, but I feel like we've covered a lot of that. I wonder if you have possibly just a piece of advice that you'd like to pass along, any advice related to coffee or business or general life. It sounds like you've had kind of a really uh, intriguing to me kind of journey to get to where you are now.
yeah. Interesting. My advice to starting a coffee brand is don't. It is so competitive. It is so hard to make money in coffee. If you're able to find a niche, then go for it. If you're not, maybe support your local coffee brands that are actually trying to do this. I've just seen, coffee people are notoriously not business people. And it's really hard to make a buck in the industry, because most of us are just so passionate about the product, right? But not necessarily passionate about making money. But then, oh shit, you have to make money in order to support those farmers. It's a whole life cycle.
And to keep
I
the
guess my
doors open. And just to keep the doors open. You can't keep paying
Yeah,
farmers if you're not making enough to pay the rent or the whatever, the mortgage.
it's an unfortunate truth. I guess my other piece with that too is though, for any coffee companies that are struggling or that are starting out, and they could use some advice. My big thing is follow your gut. I always have. I every single morning I wake up, and my team is so sick of me saying this, but I feel like the luckiest person on the face of the earth because I get to work in coffee, and I just throughout every single day I just follow that momentum, and I trust my gut. And it's one of those things where you have to stay pragmatic. You have to kind of mitigate the anxiety. But if you stick with it long enough, and it will be a long time, you can do something and find your niche. Again, the niche is really important. With the co-packing and private label, we've kind of found our niche. And there has to be something that sets you apart. It can't just be your name. It has to be something else. And that's really important.
But if you were out, let's say you're out on the road somewhere and you pop into a little local coffee roaster, what are you going to order?
Oh, I'm terrible. I like just a regular drip coffee, um, and I like an Americano, small one, small one. And if it's not good, if I will put cream and sugar in if I don't like it. So
I call that a small Americano. I call it like a European Americano so people know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's not
It's
quite
if
the
it's
same.
done right, it's the best drink on the menu.
And I really appreciate, some of your time today and sharing this information so willingly with me and the audience. And I'm excited to send people to metropoliscoffee.com to learn more if they want to. And if anyone is interested and has questions about co-packing or private labeling, don't send them to me because I don't know what I'm doing. But
Send them my way,
reach
Ryan.
out to Anne.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time too.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to that conversation with Anne Djerai of Metropolis Coffee Company, a roaster, private labeler, and coffee co-packer, among other things, based in Chicago, Illinois, and online at metropoliscoffee.com. Some key takeaways from the show. This was Anne's first podcast, and we're honored. I bet it won't be the last because she was a great guest. I wanted to define OCS sales, a term Anne dropped early on. OCS is an acronym for Office Coffee Sales, a form of vending sales providing coffee to office parks and businesses. It's a unique corner of the coffee industry. Metropolis's private labeling program came out of a need they had for themselves. They weren't finding another company offering the same opportunities, in particular at the entry level in the marketplace. According to Anne, one of the advantages to partnering with Metropolis or a private labeler is that they've already put in the investment into the needed equipment, and they've already worked through a lot of the hiccups, the mistakes, the potentially costly setbacks, so that you won't have to. Before meeting with your potential private label partner, be prepared with your idea, your brand, and your plan for sales. Metropolis will work with you, and there's a lot of possibility, but it's a back and forth partnership where you, the client, is in control of the final product, but in collaboration with Metropolis's expertise. Anne cautioned that when moving into the wholesale retail arena, that businesses need to be prepared to really consider their margins and what quantity they need to move in order to make the investment worth it. It won't be the same math as selling coffee in the cafe or as a roaster online. So, what is it that will set your brand apart on the shelf? That's our Coffee Smarter Pro episode for today. Our coffee guest expert, Anne Djerai, is the CEO of Metropolis Coffee Company based in Chicago, Illinois. If you're developing a coffee program and in need of a private labeler or considering a co-packer, reach out to Anne directly through metropoliscoffee.com. You'll find that contact info again, as well as some context for this coffee podcast and all the links in our newsletter, which you can find on coffeesmarterpodcast.com. The presenting sponsor of Coffee Smarter Pro is Roastar Coffee Packaging. Find them at roastar.com. They'll help you tell the big story of your small business. That's roastar.com. A big thanks to Crossings Coffee, who, along with Hasea Coffee Source green coffee importers, are essential to our Coffee Smarter efforts. And a shout out to our legacy partners, Zoom Bar Coffee and Tea, Steady State Coffee Roasting, Mostra Coffee Company, Coffee Cycle Roasting, Camp Coffee Company, Maria Coffee, and Cape Horn Green Coffee Importers. Our full city partners include Ignite Coffee Company, Ascend Coffee Roasters, Civets Roasting Machines, Craft 42 Roasters, and Cozy Canine Coffee. If you'd like to be on that list, please reach out to us at roastwestcoast@gmail.com. This show is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network and can be found on your favorite podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify. Search for Coffee Smarter Pro. And if you're already following and listening, give us that nice 5-star rating. It actually really helps us. If you want even more, the best place to listen, learn, and connect with the community of craft coffee is online at coffeesmarterpodcast.com or in real life at the cafe. Say hello to your local coffee roaster, and you might make a new friend. But still sign up for our newsletters to be inspired and learn from other coffee people. This episode of the podcast was written, recorded, researched, and edited by me, Ryan Woldt. That's all, everyone. Please tip your baristas. They do hard work. And drink good coffee. Smarter.